Have you ever wondered what questions to ask your financial advisor or why those questions are important? Well, this week on the podcast, we're going to talk about questions you must ask your financial advisor with John Mears right here on Red Zone Retirement Program.
In football, the red zone is where a team has to make small adjustments to ensure victory. As you approach retirement, you also need to make small adjustments to ensure success. This is the Red Zone Retirement Program with registered investment advisor and enrolled agent John Mears of Mears Money Management.
Hi. Hey, everybody. Welcome into the podcast. It's John and myself here to talk investing, finance, retirement. Coach is here with me once again on the Red Zone Retirement Program. Simple investing, smart future. To have that conversation about questions to ask your advisor, but also I think these questions are good to ask yourself. Ask yourself if you're shopping for an advisor. You can actually kind of take these. They can be a two-way player, Coach. These can go both ways.
Yes,
right. So that's the topic.
Yeah, as you're being recruited. Yeah, those are questions you want to ask the coach. Yeah, so
yeah, exactly. Right. So because we're coming up on the new year, right? So we're in December here. So this is our mid-December show. So the new year is going to be here in a hot second. And, people might start, they might be in the market for a new advisor. They might be going out and shopping around, looking around or whatever. And so these are good questions to and fair questions to ask them. But I think, again, you can also frame this on yourself a little bit to make sure that it's going to be the right, scenario, because it's not just you interviewing the potential advisor. It's also got to be a good fit for the advisor back on us as well. So Definitely. That there's that good, synergy going on.
Yes. Yeah, and these are good questions to ask anybody. Like you said, if you have a current advisor, these are fair questions to ask. I'm always happy to answer these kinds of questions because I think it cements the relationship better. If you're shopping for a new advisor, these are fair questions again that they should be able to answer happily. They should want to answer these questions.
Well, let's start with a heavy hitter, Coach, right out of the gate. We'll hit the sled and we'll hit it hard to get things started here. And that's, how do you get paid? Now, I've talked to advisors all across the country. Some people, they're funny. Like there seems to be a real split in potential customers when they're sitting down to talk with an advisor. They're either real sheepish about it, right? They kind of feel like it's an odd question, or they're super blunt. They're like, yeah, how do you get paid? Right. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fair question.
Absolutely. I think it's totally a fair question because we all know we don't work for free. I mean, we know that. So I think it's fair to ask
Hopefully we all realize that, right?
Yeah. I mean, we don't work for free. And so I think it's a very fair question to ask the advisor because we are dealing with people's money, and anything that you're paying me does cut into what you could be making and earning in the future. So we have to be able to justify our value, I think is kind of going roundabout to explain that. So we have to be able to justify our value. And so being able to explain and know how we're getting paid. Now, if an advisor does get a little bit dodgy with this, that would raise a red flag with me, honestly, because it's something they should be happy to talk about. And one thing you should be able to also tell is when you are paying fees, you should be able to see it on your statements. There should not be a question about that. I get statements from prospective new clients from their previous advisors, and you've got to be an archaeologist to kind of look through and figure out how, where these numbers are, where they're getting paid. And I've had people say straight up, I don't know how my guy gets paid. They have no idea.
All of a sudden, Indiana Jones and the Statement of Doom.
Yes. Yeah, it really shouldn't be that hard. You should know exactly what you're paying for, and you should be able to, the advisor should be able to articulate his value. I know positively that I'm worth far more than what I'm charging, but you need to know what that is. So it's a great question.
There's a couple of models. So real quick, we'll just touch on those, right? So there's like the fee only model, right? So there's some advisors are probably going to have possibly both of the two different things going on. So there's the fee only model where you just say, hey, I've built you a plan. Here you go. You pay me X number of dollars for the plan. It's yours. Do what you want with it, right? And then there's going to be like the fee based, right? So you may still have that. You may have assets under management, right? So there's some of that going on where you're getting a percentage based on how things are doing. And then of course there's like commission only, right? So again, ask, because the type of advisor you're working with how they get paid might indicate how you want to work with them or not, right? So, and this is going to kind of lead into some other questions a little bit later on. But for example, if they're commission only, and a little later on when we're having the conversation about expectations, and you say, hey, why don't they only call me when they want me to buy something? Well, that's why, because they're commission only.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you talk about the idea of being a fee base and a fee only. Somebody like me, just so people that are watching or listening know how I work. I do charge an
Sure.
upfront planning fee, and then I do charge based on assets under management in the future. And so,
Right.
I explain that. I'm happy to go through that with people.
And that's fairly normal in the retirement planning state.
It is, because there's a
business,
little
yeah.
bit of upfront work that just a lot of hours, just to be very blunt. There's a lot of upfront work. And then after that, you do want to make sure that I always tell people the plan doesn't matter much if there's no implementation. And that's why we have the ongoing fees down the road, so that we can make sure that everything gets implemented. We stay in contact. We have a great relationship, hopefully forever.
Right. And you think of it like almost like a retainer, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of advisors, because if you're working with an advisor for a longer relationship, you're doing a long-term relationship, then that's kind of where that model fits in. Again, most advisors kind of go that route because it works well for them and the client, because it's an ongoing relationship. So, but again, totally fair question. Nothing wrong with asking it.
Absolutely.
And this one sounds weird in today's day and age because we're so hypersensitive about everything. But what does your typical client look like? And I think we probably have to tweak the way that's worded nowadays, but they may have some minimums, for example. So what does your client look like? They may only work with people 50 years and older, or they have $1 million or more, something like that.
Yeah, that's again a very fair question to ask an advisor. Is what does their typical client look like? Because you do want to work with somebody that kind of knows how you feel. I don't know how
are they going to fit with
that.
me? Yeah.
How are they? I always use the example of a client of mine, good friend of mine as well. He's into muscle cars. He had bought a muscle car. Now you could go to any mechanic, and a mechanic should be able to help you with that car. However, there are specialists that mechanics that specialize only in those 1960s,
the old
and early
cars.
70s. Yes, the GTOs.
I'm a victim of that, John. I think we talked about that, right? For a second there, I was like, I think you're talking about me. I've got a 72 Cougar sitting out there, and I can't take it to a regular mechanic because they're like, and a lot of them are younger. They're like, I don't even know what to do with this, you know.
So so it's nice because if you're going to talk shop with the guy or gal, whoever you're dealing with, you want to be able to have somebody that you actually have a little bit of rapport with as well. I think that helps as well. Yeah. So that's why you want to work with somebody that, like for me, I do work with retirees or about to be retirees. They are people that are over 50. That is an age that I'm at, so I also relate to these people. So we can talk the same language. It's and I think that's why it's important to have an advisor, and also to use the medical analogy, which we've all heard. You either have a general practitioner who handles anybody at any age, or you have the brain surgeon. So you want to have someone that specializes in, if you're going to be a retiree and you're going to figure out an income strategy, you want to have that brain surgeon, if you will, that knows how to work with that.
And this, what does your client look like, really kind of has two subset questions to it here. So we'll kind of do these. So kind of question, part A, if you will, is what is your investment philosophy? So it kind of ties back into that, what do they look like kind of question, because, the philosophy, John, that you may have, let's just say you go sit down in front of an advisor for the first time and you're like, I'm thinking about retiring in 5 years, and I'm really worried about this, that, and the other. And their philosophy is, but we really need to get out there and be aggressive and go, go, go. Well, that might not resonate with you, right? You might be looking for more protection or vice versa. So that's a nice little subset. Yeah.
And so for my investment philosophy, I do use the Nobel Prize winning 4 factors that people have heard of, where we use stocks. Stocks have a premium over bonds, value over growth, small over large, and then where we're looking at dividend paying stocks in particular as well. So that's something that's won a Nobel Prize. However, my neighbor across the street, he's a lot younger than I am. He's about 20 years younger. He will never be a client of mine, not because we don't like each other, but because he's young and he is aggressive. He gets up at 4:30 in the morning and he starts trading and starts doing all this stock, buying and selling stocks. That's just what he wants to do. So he is a different guy doing different things. He has a different philosophy. We get along great. We talk about Christmas stuff, but he's definitely not, our philosophies are not aligned. Most of the people that are retirees, they have done a great job of savings. They don't want to do stuff that's too crazy at some point, and they want to know more. They want more assurance Yes, they want stuff that we can go by with historical data. So that's kind of
well, and so that leads to kind of sub question part B, which is do you have like a specialty or a strength? And you know, I mean, I work with advisors all across the country. I talk with different ones. I work with one who only specializes in talking to first responders. Like he doesn't take any other clients except for people that are, you know, police, fire, EMS, that kind of thing. That's just what he does. You're also very, very focused on taxes. That could be kind of a specialty or a subset, if you will, where that's a big piece. Not every advisor, you know, they take taxes into account, but maybe they don't go as deep into it as you do. They do their planning and then they say, now, you know, bounce this off your CPA kind of thing.
Right. And that is my strength, but that is something you definitely want to ask if a prospective advisor, if you're out there shopping around, is what is their strength? And again, if they can't kind of narrow it down. Now, if you ask me, bammo, right out of the gate, I'm going to tell you that taxes are, to me, taxes are the elephant in the room. I've said this so many times on a podcast that the markets go up and down, but taxes, once they go away, they're gone forever. So I think that taxes are the largest impediment to a successful retirement that you can have. So that's why, and that happens to be my strength because I am an enrolled agent. I had a large tax practice for a number of years. That is definitely my strength. And because I have the accounting background, income strategies and distribution strategies are also my number two strength right behind that. And that's kind of doing the math and figuring out how to do, make sure the payments are done on time every month to you forever. So those are my two strengths, but taxes are definitely the priority. And that's a very fair question to ask somebody. And if somebody says their strength is taxes, ask them some tax questions and see how they respond, because there's very little that I haven't seen out there that, and I know talking to other advisors at conferences and whatnot, they're not as savvy as they think they are.
Not as far in the tax weeds. Yeah.
Well, as big a nerd as I am.
There you go. And if you need some help with some tax questions and you got some things you'd like to learn a little bit more about, John's got a couple of Brooks. He's got a couple of Brooks that he gives away. Not streams, Brooks. He's got a couple of books that he gives away. Check this out if you want to get a couple copies. John has a couple of free books, Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California, that reveal exactly how you can experience zero taxes in retirement and overcome the IRS lien on your 401k, IRA, and 403b, which could threaten your future lifestyle. These are complimentary, so all you have to do to pick these up 100% free is just stop by RescueMyRetirement.net. That's RescueMyRetirement.net. Fill in the basic info and he'll ship those out to you immediately. That's RescueMyRetirement.net for a copy of Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California. All right, so let's get back into some more questions you can ask an advisor, potential advisor, or your current advisor. So we kind of went through, I think, a lot of the philosophy kind of stance a little bit here, John. Let's go into some expectations. Okay, a few things in this category. Right off the bat, how often do we talk to each other? What kind of contact are we talking about, right? So I kind of mentioned it earlier. If you only get contacted when they want to buy or sell something, well, A, that might be the type of person that you have. And B, that might not be the expectation that you're looking for. Now, if you're doing a relationship, like with John, what you do with your clients, and you're having kind of that ongoing, almost on retainer kind of thing, it's still worthwhile to say, what kind of expectations are we looking at? Once a year, twice a year? What does that look like? I imagine it's probably heavier in the early days and maybe even the first couple of years. And then it probably kind of, tapers down as time goes on, I'm guessing.
It does dwindle. I can say in my own practice, the first year you're probably we have strong contact every 6 weeks or so. It's actually more than that right at the very beginning. But really, as we're trying to implement about every 6 weeks or so.
You're building the plan.
Yeah. Depends how quickly the client responds more than us. So it's about every 6 weeks or so. But once we've kind of gotten into the implementation level of things, we usually meet twice a year. Once in the spring, tax time, and once later in the year, as we're doing year-end tax planning. Once we kind of know where our income is, and we're doing some late year strategic ideas and whatnot. So we'll meet in October, and usually in early March. That's when we'll meet. And then in between, then people are watching this podcast. We communicate through the podcast, but we also will communicate via emails and newsletters. I also, if you want to get a hold of me, you can go to bookachatwithjohn.net, and you can pretty much get an appointment with me anytime you want. And so we can talk more frequently if that's necessary. A lot of people don't need it. So
Right. Very true. And actually, that's kind of a great that you tagged into that, because that was my next question was going to be ask them, what other kind of educational resources or things do you have? And again, this is about setting expectations. So if you're expecting to talk to them in the office or whatever the case is twice a year, but you want some additional, information or education or just access to stuff, there's things like this. We do the podcast and the video show, for, just that reason.
Right. Yeah. That's the educational resources are something that I'm very big on, is that a lot of people, the reason why they're not confident in their plans is just because of lack of education. Once you know more, you start understanding this is why what we have and why we're doing it. And that's very helpful.
Yeah. I feel like we need that the more you know kind of pop up thing there, or G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. One of those two things, right?
Right.
And different advisors do things like lunch and learns, or they do educational seminars. I mean, all kinds of
webinars.
Stuff, right?
I do it topically. I don't always do them every month. I used to. I'm less frequent now. It depends on what's topical and what I'll put out there. But I have them all lined up. If somebody has a question about Medicare, I did a Medicare webinar a couple of years ago. I just zip that out to people. So it's already teed up already. So.
Exactly. Okay. So this next two we'll kind of wrap up with these next two here. I think they kind of work pretty well together, but we'll start with what happens in an emergency situation, John. Like, so if I need something and you're out, right? Who do I talk to? And I think these last two questions are going to tie into the kind of firm that you're shopping for. So if you're looking for a smaller boutique firm, where it's just a couple of people in the office, the expectation of, who do I talk to in the event of an emergency, or also just like, who do I work with on a regular basis? Like if I'm coming to work with Mears Money, am I working with John, or am I working with like a junior partner? But if you're working with a bigger firm, I think people need to set that expectation for themselves that, I might be I'm more of a number or cog in the machine, and there might be 25 advisors. So I may not always get the same kind of thing. So those are questions to ask, right?
Absolutely. Definitely a question you want to ask. And again, the smaller boutique type firms that, like what I have, the good news is that we're small, but the bad news is that we're small as well. Sometimes, you're going to get personalized service. You're going to get personalized, advice, which is really, really good. Right. I do have what we call a dispersed workforce. Means a lot of people work virtually nowadays. Right. And so I have a couple of virtual assistants that kind of handle things on a day-to-day basis. They handle all the paperwork. When we get back to the idea of emergencies, though, I tell people, and this goes back to my days as a tax guy as well, there really aren't any emergencies. If there are emergencies, it's something that we hadn't, are usually a failure of planning that we have done. There are rare.
So they're pretty few and far between.
They're far and few. I think in all my years, I've had one true emergency, which was a deathbed issue. And clients will get my cell phone. I try and have people not call me on my personal cell phone because I have a life. But if somebody really does need me, I tell people we don't ever want to leave you in a lurch. We always want to make sure we can take care of you. So between me and my assistants, we have everything covered. There's not, unless it's a federal holiday, but we don't have days off. We kind of make sure somebody's always at the phone or at the emails, covering the emails and whatnot.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what we always try and respond to all our emails, that day, certainly within 24 hours. And so if you have a question where you need a distribution or something like that, or want to put some money in, one of us is always available. And some of it is beyond us, where we use our primary custodian would be Charles Schwab, where sometimes as much as emergency it is, sometimes Schwab will consider it an emergency themselves. But we try and work through all that as well. But it's a great question. So who do you work with? I will be the advice giver, and then my assistants, they will be the actual paperwork. They're actually the ones that do a lot of the big work on a day-to-day basis for what people need. Again, for distributions or deposits or whatever.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So those are some questions to ask your advisor, and again, ask yourself along the way, so that you kind of can find the right fit for you. And that's honestly why so many advisors do complimentary consultations and reviews, is it's a feeling out process. So it gives you a great chance to kind of ask those questions and do a couple things and see if they're the right fit for you. Of course, you can also check out things like our video podcast or an audio podcast version whichever form you like. If you want to see our smiling faces, you can go kind of either way, but that's a great way to kind of add on. So I'll give out all the information, then we'll jump over and do a 2-minute warning real fast, or we'll take an email question from folks. But if you need some help, reach out to John. He mentioned earlier, book a chat with John.net. Let's book a chat with John.net. And of course, you can also just go by mearsmoney.com. And at mearsmoney.com, there's all sorts of tools, tips, resources. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, all that good jazz. But let's go to the 2-minute warning, Coach. All right, we're here for the 2-minute warning, and it's time for an email question from Cal. Where was Cal at, Coach? I forgot to look where he was at.
Cal is up in San Luis Obispo.
Oh, well, good. I wouldn't have been able to say that right anyway. So, that's where he's at. Cal, great question, by the way. So, especially in California, it's pretty interesting. So, Cal says, Coach, my grandfather has always told me the best investment you can ever make is dirt. I like his grandfather already. So I've spent about 35 years buying land all around the state, and now I'm what they call land rich, cash poor. A developer's made me an offer for about $2 million on some property, and I feel like I should sell it to him, but I don't want to just buy more land. So can you give me some options and some other things to think about for this money? And if he's cash poor, Coach, I mean, he needs to maybe build up a retirement, portfolio, right? So he's got land, which is great.
This is not that atypical either, Cal. This is something I get more often than not, where people are equity rich and cash poor, whether it be their own home, which we can tap into in certain circumstances, or rental property, or in this case, dirt, land. Now, I would disagree with, I believe it was your uncle who said this. Grandfather? Okay.
Grandfather.
Your grandfather. There's nothing wrong with owning land or owning property. Nothing at all. But I wouldn't say that's the best investment.
Well,
and you're finding out why, because it's illiquid. It's something that's
the old saying though, right? They don't make any more of it, so that's why, right?
Yes. Yes, nothing wrong with it either. There's nothing wrong with it, but again, I would have said that is supplemental with perhaps a retirement plan. So now the big question becomes, now what do you do with $2 million? Should you do it? Should you not? And again, I think that if you've been doing this for 35 years, that to me tells me that you're at or near retirement age. And so if you're going to have a monthly income, it's hard for raw land to provide a monthly income. And so you would want to consider selling it. Yes. Now, how do we sell it? You might want to consider doing an installment sale so you don't have such a big tax hit all at one time. The downside of that is you got to trust this person's going to make sure that the money gets paid in the future. But that's a great way to mitigate taxes, is by doing an installment sale. You can spread that out. And then once you have perhaps the cash in hand, then we can kind of come up with perhaps a distribution strategy once we get past the tax implications about how much you can draw off of that. Now, with a typical 60-40 portfolio, depending on your age, we could probably draw off of that. Honestly, we're going to rough this out a little more than 5% off $2 million. That's a nice chunk of change. That's almost 6 figures. Yeah. So that's something that you could probably, I hope, depending on your budget, live off of. I do believe in doing a full comprehensive plan. I know that sounds corny, but there's more to this, Cal, than just, hey, what should I do with the money? But if we can take a look at everything that you have, including Social Security and your expenses, it'd be great to kind of walk through this and see how could we benefit from having a nice chunk here to ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, obviously, with these email questions, we don't always get enough information, or we have to admit certain things so that we're not saying people's stuff on the airwaves here. But it's like anything else, just trying to give a couple of ideas. I mean, even just dumping this in a regular, $2 million into a regular Roth or something like that, right? I mean, just lots of different things he could do, especially if he just doesn't have a whole lot, which it sounds like he doesn't, on the retirement side. He's just got a lot of land, which is probably going to set him up just fine for retirement. He just needs to offload a little bit of it. So,
yeah. I think that there's a lot of different avenues he could go. And again, with a little bit more information.
He's got the smorgasbord.
But this is a typical email, though, where somebody says, hey, I got some money. What do I do with it? That is a very normal question that I get asked. And there's usually not enough information. I always make this like, hey, what should a coach coming up to me from the other team or another team going, hey, what should I run on the first play of the game? I don't know. Depends on whether you got a quarterback or running. There's a lot of information to know.
Right.
But that's what people typically ask. So I'm trying to give as best answer I can, Cal, with what your circumstances are. But again, I've seen this. I've done this, know what kind of situation you're likely to be in, but we can work from there, knowing that installment sale might be a tax opportunity for you. And then again, even if you put the money into a brokerage account, capital gains rates might be low enough where you could be paying the 0% or 50% tax bracket in the future. So there's things.
That's
to
a good
consider.
point. So what should you do? Well, book a chat with John.net.
Yes.
That's book a chat with John.net. And that'll do it for the podcast this week. So again, folks, if you need some, got some questions, need some help, always reach out to Coach and have a conversation. Talk to a qualified professional of some type. If it's not John, with somebody before you take any action on something on our show or any others. Always see how it's going to relate to your specific situation. And you can also find them online at mearsmoney.com. That's mearsmoney.com. And Coach, I'll see you after Christmas. So have a good Christmas.
Thank you. You too.
I hope all the listeners do as well. We'll talk in between that little window, the dead zone, I call it, between Christmas and New Year's,
Bowl week,
where not a lot happens. Yeah, that's right. We'll see you next time here on the podcast. This has been Red Zone Retirement Program, Simple Investing, Smart Future with John Mears.
Advisory services offered through Mears Money Management, Inc., an RIA registered in the states of California and Texas. California Department of Insurance License number 0685203.